What does this data tell us about President Trump's positioning heading into the final weeks of the campaign? We know he's eager, and he will be getting back out to his campaign trail as soon as today. He'll be heading to Florida.
Well, that's right, Anne Marie. That Washington Post ABC News poll certainly wasn't good news for Trump, though he, of course, was quick to write it off as inaccurate. I think we all still have fresh memories of election night 2016, and I remember having pollsters on the phone just devastated, feeling that they hadn't calculated correctly the mood of the country. So, of course, everyone's still pretty cautious about getting an accurate read on the situation. But what we can say at this point is that we would expect to see a narrowing in the polls into the final weeks, as is typically the pattern. And it's good news for former Vice President Biden that his lead nationally at least appears to be actually solidifying and so far not allowing Trump to close that gap. But of course, there are so many caveats here, and the two big ones I would point out are the battleground states and turnout. Of course, a handful of key swing states here could be the deal breakers for a Biden win, and the state polls are much closer, even in that Washington Post ABC News poll, and less clear in the leading candidate than at the national level. So one in particular I would watch, of course, is Pennsylvania, which Trump has been making a hard run at. You mentioned Florida, he's headed to today. These are both key states. And secondly, it's always about turnout. We do know that millions are already sending in mail-in ballots, but this is an election unlike any other. And even for polls that measure likely voters, it's hard to say whether those responding will show up on Election Day, particularly given the strange circumstances this year.
Michelle, now that he's had his first public appearance since he was treated for COVID, what issues will you be watching for Trump to prioritize in these final weeks?
Well, you know, the COVID diagnosis certainly interrupted one that he had been trying to push very hard, and that is law and order. It certainly appeals to his core supporters. So we could expect to hear him kind of get back to that. But he won't be able to avoid all the economy-related issues right now. Of course, front and center, and you've been talking about this on the program, is the stimulus showdown. On that, we can expect to see, Trump try to continue to stay in the driver's seat in negotiations. It's sort of vintage Trump to sort of blow up the deal, only to be the one to say that he wants to rescue it again. So we've seen him take a similar tack in other negotiations. You know, Kim Jong-un comes to mind, for instance, where he'll just try to control the negotiations. So we'll see this jockeying back and forth between the Democrats led by Nancy Pelosi and then, of course, the White House and Republicans in Congress. But so we're going to see that stimulus back and forth. Whether or not we see it before election or after in terms of a package is very critical for the economy. It might not play as much into election politics in terms of, feeling each side feeling that they'll need to do that. But lastly, we'll also see this sort of tug of war between the Trump and Biden camps on whether Americans should view the economy as having moved past COVID with strong fundamentals, which is what the Trump team would favor, or just hobbling along and in need of a leader with a far different style on how to manage the pandemic. So, you'll hear the Biden camp continue to link the economy's state with the COVID response and the lack thereof in their view. So for those undecided voters still left, October 29th will bring us a first look at the third quarter GDP data and perhaps a little bit more information there and elsewhere to take a view on that.
Speaking of those undecided voters, a lot of them are independents, Michelle. And yesterday I went through the Washington Post ABC poll, and we see really a stark contrast to where Trump was versus Clinton in the independents, where Clinton actually trailed, where he is versus Biden. I mean, look at that versus Biden, 52-40 for the independents. Is this where either candidate is going to win?
Well, I think that's certainly very key, Anne Marie. I mean, it's going to be one of the big factors is independents and moderates. I mean, who might be swayed one way or the other, and tend to vote on issues that might be unpredictable. Maybe they're one-issue voters, or they're like seven-issue voters, and it's hard for them to decide the weights of all those issues right now. So, yeah, certainly that's going to be key. And I did notice that as well, that the independents seem to be shifting more toward Biden in this case, which is good news for his camp because that is a key constituency that, as you know, was lost to Trump in 2016.